Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Mind Management Mentors podcast. As always, I Cuddy Cudworth, the UK's leading mind management coach, bringing on another fascinating guest. And I apologize for being a little bit croaky. I've had a bit of a chest infection. So, this is my sexy, sultry voice, or really annoying, rough voice, as you like. Today is going to be a powerful episode. We're going to be talking and touching about religious trauma, addiction. Um, Something I've never heard of, which I know you're going to explain, the Appalachia people in America, and those kind of things we're going to be talking about. But Jeremy, introduce yourself, tell us what you do, and tell us why you're here.
How are you doing? My name is Jeremy. I am from Lawrenceburg, Kentucky, in America, and I'm proud to be where I'm from. Doesn't mean I'm always proud to be an American, but I'm proud where I'm from anyway. And the overwhelming majority of the time, I am proud to be an American. But even bigger than that, I'm a child of God that loves to use his story through songs and my own personal stories, my own personal traumas, my own personal trials. My failings are my favorite things to talk about. And so, over the course of time, spent time as a pastor, spent time in music ministry, spent time in humanitarian efforts. And my experiences of work are across the board because I have been in music my whole life, and music just don't pay the bills all the time. You know what I mean? So yeah, a lot of experiences that I now use to tell my own story. At one time in my life, I was a dead man, and I was brought back to life through a lot of intentional effort that God brought me through, a lot of remembrances that God walked me through. And on the other side of it, a lot of things make sense to me for my own story. And I try to use those things that make sense in my life to help others find things to make sense in their own. So, yeah, the way that I live my life is the way that Jesus taught me to. I don't necessarily see Jesus the same way that religion sees him, but I do believe unequivocally for people that are trying to master their minds that he is absolutely the best interpreter of the language of love that we've ever been given, in a way that he shows us what a virtuistic life looks like. And I've adopted that into my own life in a very real way. I've followed Jesus since I was 6 years old, and I've adopted it into my adult life now. That has turned me back into the child of God I was created to be in the first place. And so, yeah, I use my own stories and songs to talk about it. So thank you so much for having me.
Not a problem at all, Jeremy. Now, there's a lot of branches to this story that we're going to deep dive through this podcast, and I've got a feeling this is going to be one of those podcasts that I listen more than actually ask questions because in the little 5 minutes we chatted about before we started the podcast, I was like, oh, there's some things I want to uncover and I want to learn and I want to understand from you, Jeremy. So, Jeremy, I'll give a brief overview of who you are as well from that quick understanding that I had. Um, a man of God, a pastor, addiction to painkillers. We're starting to formulate a very American lifestyle, and that's not to be
Yeah, keep going down the list. It
yeah.
builds and builds and builds.
So we're going to talk about you being a pastor. We're going to talk about you walking away from being a pastor, falling in love with Jesus at a very young age, but autism as well. Autism, you were undiagnosed autism until you were just a few years ago. So, how did autism, being undiagnosed, show up in your life, Jeremy?
I mean, I could give you 1,000 stories, but I'll kind of give you just a general picture. As a kid, I recognize autism in my story because of what I learned about it.
Yeah,
There was a certain part of my own life where, as a pastor, I dealt with special needs kids, so I was around it. I also, in my family, there's history of it. Uh, I was at the time caring for two nonverbal autistic twins, and I was trying to um, do my part to help wherever I could in their life. And because of that, I was learning more and more and more about autism in and of itself. Uh, Keeping in mind for myself that over years of time, I had several people come up and say, "Hey, are you autistic?" And at the time, I just disregarded it because I had a cousin that was mentally retarded, severely mentally retarded. And in my brain at that time, I associated the two. And so anybody that would ask, I thought that's what they were asking me. And I was just like, no, I'm not that. But as I learned what autism was and how it manifests itself in each individual very, very differently, and then was able to associate the things that I had learned about these two nonverbal autistic kids that I loved dearly. And so there was a lot of correlations in what I was learning, not so much about what they were doing, because like I said, they were nonverbal, they were a different part of the spectrum than I am, but the things that I was learning about what their brains and how they were processing information and the pattern thinking and the way that that applies to uh, as high functioning autistic person, those patterns are actually very helpful if you know what's happening in your mind. And so for me, there were things in my childhood that easily brought me back to, oh yeah. For me, I'm grateful I was not diagnosed as a child. My mother was the kind of mom that she would have had me in everything. She would have been a helicopter mom. She would have, she really would have been worried, that I was gonna, hurt myself. But it's the exact opposite because I was undiagnosed. I never had a curfew as a child. I walked around in the creeks and hollers when I was in Kentucky, and I spent some time in Chicago as a kid for a couple of years growing up. And so, I'd walk the neighborhoods of my suburban neighborhood up there, and it was just that was my life. I was just this little creative kid walking around in his own world, whether I was in the country or on the concrete, it didn't matter. And so, um, the biggest things that I can tell you about how autism has affected my life now is it has enabled me to do a lot of self-reflection and a lot of the whys behind things happened in my life, or why, even more so, why I interpreted things the way that I did. Um, it's still happening in my life. I'm still waking up to the things that and the ways that autism affected me because I thought I was a broken child. I thought I was a broken man. I thought I was a broken human being. I thought there was no reason. Why should I feel and think these things when it seems so against my judgment? And the times that I'm able to walk myself back through that are the times that I literally gave my own power to somebody else and let them make the decision for me. And I followed a program or a situation down a path that led me to really hurting myself and my mentality. And so, that's what, a lot of people would call shadow work. I was doing the same thing in regards to my autism, and no judgment. I was allowing all the grace I needed to walk myself through my addictions, through the things that I had dealt with as a kid. I was sexually assaulted, I guess, as a kid from a neighborhood bully. So just a lot of work that had to be done over the course of my own life, that because I now knew what I knew about the functioning of my brain and the processing of emotions and how that affects Jeremy and not anybody else. Here I am, I'm studying my own brain. So, but those are the answers that I got because I I wasn't afraid to do that work and go back over the course of my life and see, all right, what was this, autism, or was this your ego? Because that's the same thing. There's ways that and decisions I've made over the course of my life that I now, as an old man, can look back and go, oh, buddy, that was your ego just trying to shine, man, and you fell right on your face, man. That sucked. Uh, but that's a gift that we give ourselves. When we understand how our pain has affected us, and then when we realized at the end of the day that, even back then, I was doing my best. I was trying as hard as I could. I made a couple bad calls, but I was just trying to survive, man. I didn't know what was going on in my life. Or maybe I knew exactly what I was doing and I was trying to manipulate somebody and it happened. And on the other side of that, I fell on my face. And here I am now dealing with the consequences of that. For me, as an autistic man going through therapy, it made that part of my journey and healing very easy. I have the ability to basically take my trauma and put it on a little shelf for just a second if I need to, prepare myself, and then pull it back down and set it in front of my face and my eyes closed and I'm kind of in in my own meditative space, and I can see that problem unfold, and I can look at it as though I'm staring at it, from 10,000 feet above, and things just make sense. And I'm able to, and that's the beautiful part about my art now, is that I'm able to take that same process of pain and trauma uh, and turning that into gratitude and joy and peace, and understanding that there's a purpose for that pain. And the power is once you understand the purpose for it, it gives you the right to use it. And once you have the right to use it, that's when other people pay attention, because they see the confidence in your own belief. They see that it happened for you too. And maybe it can happen for me. The Tao says, the reason that I believe that it is to be so is because I can see it within myself. So anytime that I'm struggling with maybe a day that somebody's having, or they're taking their stuff out on me, man, the last teaching Jesus gave me was, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. They just don't understand what they're saying or doing, or how they're acting, and how it's actually impacting not only me, but a lot of other people around them. And sometimes you just got to go, hey, 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 do you mean that? Do you mean to say that? Do you mean to talk to me that way? And that's the part of me that being a pastor has always helped, because I don't have a problem approaching somebody and saying, I just want you to understand what you just did there. Did you mean that? Because if you didn't, then you might want to talk to that person, or think about what you did next time you do it, knowing that if they don't listen, it's fine. I don't walk up to everybody and do that. But if I love you, you better believe I'm gonna be that guy that's like, hey man, this is kind of not your character, and I don't know that you realize what you're doing here. And many times I learn my own lesson, because I'm able to hear their perspective. And then at the end of that conversation, a lot of times I'm going, golly, I probably would have done the same thing. It's just, I see you, and you don't have to hide through fear or shame or guilt, or, I want you. That's what I want. I want to talk to you. And that's a gift that you can give to people, if you know that you're willing to go there with them. If you know that if they have given you and told you their worst, you got to know within yourself that hey, I'll give it right back to you. I'll let you know. That's where you were at. Let me tell you, man. Let me tell you my story. Let me tell you where I was at. And at the end of my story, I can turn around and I see Jesus there every time, and I see my Creator next to me. That's it. That's all I need. Because at the end of my story, because of the way I live my life, I know I'm not the highest power. I know I'm not the one that ultimately makes the clocks tick and makes the leaves fall. I'm not that guy. And that in and of itself is the power that we can give ourselves, in realizing we're all children of God. We're all children of the same Creator. We're all hair follicles on the arm of God here. We all have different skin colors, different haircuts. We wear different clothes. Our eyes even see things differently, because some of us wear this prescription glasses, others are colorblind, others have 20/20. We are all souls walking around in these little flesh suits trying to understand what's going on. And as soon as we realize that we are all of the same substance, we all came from the same cells here. We're all living the same experience. You experience it differently. Look, I firmly believe there's things that you've been through in your life that I would have killed myself over. There's things that I've been through in my life that you would have killed yourself over. But God did not make you. He did not put your soul in my body. He put your soul in your body. He put my soul in my body. I'm a soul that has a body. I'm not a body with a soul. And so I think if we can live our lives accordingly, and it's not hard, it's called virtue. The church seems to think that we sin every day. Every day I'm a sinner. I'm a sinner every day. No, you don't have to be. If you choose to be, you will be. But if you just walk in virtue and just let others be themselves and love them in spite of that, love your neighbor as yourself, like love the Lord your God with all your heart. And we do that by authentically being ourselves, unapologetically knowing that we stand on the foundation that Jesus left us with, saying, hey, it's the past is the past. You have to die to yourself. You have to get rid of the past that you don't want to be a part of anymore. Don't let it hold on to you any longer. Die to that. But look, heaven on earth is real. And I believe the kingdom of heaven is here and now. I believe it's people that don't understand what that means are walking sometimes in their own heaven or hell on earth. Sometimes those people make the decision to just stay in hell on earth, and they're fine with it. I'm not. I'm not. And if I love you, I'm not gonna, at the very least, try to understand you. Let me understand you. I want to see you. Like, I'm here. And so that is what autism has effectively given me so much confidence in what I do. It's because I have a brain that processes emotions and things over the course of decades of being a pastor, of being a first responder, of being a humanitarian worker. I've worked with the best of the best and the worst of the worst, and I've seen everything in between. And this brain knows how to put things together. And I, as a pastor, was part of, healing people. Now, I believe in the power of healing. I don't think it's the way that televangelism's turned it into. I don't believe in that necessarily. I'm not interested in the conversation even really. It's just something that just kind of bothers me that exists. But there's absolutely something very, very powerful when you have somebody next to you that says, I believe that God has the best in store for you. I believe that. I'll believe with you. You don't have to just sit in this world by yourself thinking, surely no way I could be that, or no way God could ever do this. Or sometimes we need one person next to us saying, I see it too. I see it too. I don't care if your family sees it or your friends don't see it, because look, that journey's a very lonely journey. That's why they call it the hero's journey. It's literally you're diving down into the depths of your own hell to grab the keys to your own soul. And you pray to God you can come out on the other side of it. And the way that I choose to share not only my story, but my advice with people that I do talk to and counsel, my number one spot is start with Jesus. Like, don't, if a lot of people are very offended by that when you come at them that way, but it's because they're seeing it through the goggles of religion. That is not what I'm saying. I'm saying if you need to, take him completely for only his words. Don't you just study what he said about what, and you can correlate your life within his teachings and understand what the best thing to do is to get you on the other side. My show is called Jeremy Zeller and the Other Side. The reason for that is because I literally had to move to the other side of what I thought was real in my life. I had built so autism, you deal a lot with masking. Masking is when you basically fake it. You put a smile on your face just to make it through so you don't have to deal with something. Masking could be, I was the class clown when I was a senior in high
What was
school.
I?
Yeah, we were given awards, and my senior superlative was class clown. And so it's like, I was very, very good at masking my emotions. And um, I digress. I can't remember what I was saying,
No, no,
but
it's okay. It's okay.
uh, I know I was
Talking
talking
about
about.
masking, no, it's all a part of the journey, and it's especially when it comes to talking about autism. Because what I was going to ask you is, what were you? So for someone watching this, what were you thinking and feeling that you didn't know was ADHD's ways of thinking and dealing with things? That somebody else listening to this podcast would go, "Oh, I think like that, and I deal with that."
You said ADHD. Did you mean
Sorry,
autism?
autism.
Oh no,
Sorry,
that's fine. Can you repeat the question?
yeah. So when you said when you were a child growing up and you were thinking things and feeling things and you didn't know that was autism,
Correct.
the way that you explain it is that when you were working with the two children, two family members who were, as you would say, mentally retarded, that would now come under a different label, which would be non-verbal autistic, right?
Sure.
Perfect. Right. So you said as a kid when you were growing up, you were thinking things and feeling things, and you didn't realize that was the autistic brain. What were you thinking and feeling that you now know was the autistic brain?
Great question. I think for me, the easiest way for me to say, okay, I'm gonna listen. I'm gonna at least listen to this therapist that's sitting across from me saying, Jeremy, you need to listen to me. You really are autistic. Let me walk you through it. The easiest thing about my childhood that made me identify with it was um, the masking for sure.
Yeah.
Knowing that there was moments that I walked into a room and I knew how I had to act in order to not be noticed
Yeah.
or to not have to deal with some expectation that the room brought with it.
Mhm.
Those are very clear moments for me. Moments where I had the internal dialogue, even as a child, saying, "What do I need to wear right now?"
Yeah.
And it didn't necessarily sound like that, but those are the conversations I remember having, whether it was the funeral of my grandfather, or walking in on somebody doing something, or it does any of those triggering events that put you in a place of how must I react now to survive.
Mm.
I remember as a child being very aware of those moments and having literal internal dialogues of, okay, Jeremy, here we are. Um, the cool thing about my own childhood, though, is Jesus was quite literally my imaginary friend. Like, I literally talked to him in that way. Um, I lost touch with that as a teenager, as I'm sure, most people do with their imaginary friends. But that presence never left, never, and is still here today. I can feel him here just like I did when I was a kid. Um, but situational awareness and the masking that it took to survive is something I remember very well as a kid. I remember having to hide my tics. I still hide my tics. I do that stuff. I walk around on my tippy toes. My face does weird squunches, and I that's just those are tics that I let them go. I don't like, unless I'm like having I try to limit it when I'm in public. But if I'm just around my friends now, because there was a time my first wife didn't even know I was autistic. Like, I hid everything, and so um, that was the gift, that finding out why my brain works the way it does. That's what it gave me. It's second only to Jesus in my awakening. And now it's, as an adult, um, whether it directly applies to me or not, it's still something I want other people to be aware of that's happening. I don't know what statistics are in the UK, but I know the last statistic I heard was that 1 in 35 kids are now being diagnosed as autistic in America.
Mm.
And it's a shocking number, really, compared to what it was just 40 years ago. It was 1 in a couple hundred, I believe. Don't look, you can pop it up on your screen or whatever if you want to. But the point is, it's changing a lot. And my goal as somebody that's trying to raise awareness to autism in America. I do it in the state of Kentucky because I'm a Kentucky artist, but I talk about it everywhere I go. So I'm trying to raise the universal awareness of autism. It's not a scary conversation. Too many parents, I talk with parents that are shameful when they talk about their child being diagnosed. They act like it's something that they should be ashamed of. And I tell these parents, I just had a meeting last week with one, and I was like, "You've got this completely wrong, man. Like, your son is a gift." Because he was showing me pictures and seeing if there's any cues I could pick up on. And he was a beautiful, happy, healthy little kid, beautiful smile on his face. And I'm like, what's happening right there? Because whatever that is, that's what you need to keep doing. And he was in his underwear playing in the mud. He was a 6-year-old kid, just being a 6-year-old kid playing in the mud. But it was one of the more beautiful things that I had seen, because it's a kid being a kid. And, you know, if these parents can understand that what God has actually done in giving them a child like that is, once you find out what that gift is, it will blow you away in regards to you having this 100% knowing of saying, I know exactly what my child was born for, and I know exactly why she was given to me. But you have to, in the same way that I had to dissect my own brain and my own ego to get to the bottom of what is this all about. As parents, you must do the same for the sake of your child. You must dissect it. Look, some people believe in therapy, others don't. I do. I think it's a beautiful path to walk down. It's one you must be very, very mindful of who you're receiving that therapy from. Absolutely. But if you can find those people, it's a beautiful, beautiful thing.
Mhm.
And I think if the people will if the parents will step outside of their fear, their shame, their judgment, their guilt of why, oh God, have you put me in this position, while they're looking at a kid that's literally slobbering in the floor. And I get it. I was there. I get that. But the beautiful part about it is there's a reason. And you also have to understand this child will become an adult. And just like all of our children, they all slobber in the floor. You got to let them, you got to do the work to figure out what they're there for. And the beautiful part about autism is that it makes it obvious. Because once you understand, is this brain working through the pathways of mathematics? Is it working through the pathways of colors? Is it through the pathways of vibrations and sounds? How do they awaken because they enjoy doing art? And when they do art, what colors are they using? And do they know why? Let's get into that. Like, it's just doing the work. It's putting your boots on and not being afraid to get in the mud with them.
Yeah.
And once parents understand the beauty that autism brings with it, because they are beautiful minds. Once that kind of awakening of awareness comes into the zeitgeist, man, I think it'll be a game changer. In my mind, I think autism is the missing link. I think it is what ties us together spiritually and materially. And I think it's a mind that God gives to all of us on a different spectrum. Some people have it enough to be actually diagnosed, and some people either don't or they don't talk about it. And it's
Yeah.
okay. Autism, in many ways, is a picture of humanity.
Yeah.
You cannot put a label on that many people, but we have. And I'll put, if that's my label, I will talk about it, and I will use my own story, because if that's what I am, then that's what I am. It's a beautiful thing to me. I love it. And it, like I said, only second to Jesus has it contributed to my awakening.
And thank you for sharing. Extremely powerful. Coming from a place of experience, more than learning from somebody else is very powerful for people. Experience is a great lesson taught. Talking about the religious trauma, how has your ideology moved away from what you believe other people are seeing from the ideology of certain religions in America?
I mean, I could go as deep as you want on this one,
I'm
but
sure.
sum,
I'm
no,
sure you can.
I can sum it up like this. I think there's a lot of things going on. I think right now, especially with the the tragedy that's going on in Israel, um, they are one people, literally. It's in the same book that we all read. They call it the Torah, we call it the Holy Bible, and they're literally it's the same family.
Mhm.
It's the same family. They all came from the same grandfather, and they're fighting over, whose ball it is. And it's very frustrating as a man of God that has placed his life on this path, because I do believe that we are children of God, but I do not believe that certain factions of Israel are representing the children of God very well, which actually led me to believe what I do. And that is that we're all children of God. It's not the people from Israel. Like, we are all literal children of God. In the same way that they're the same children of the same great lineage, we're the same too. We're all the same.
Yeah.
It doesn't, the God that they try to use, they call it one thing, and, Hindus call it something else. We're all worshiping the same creator at the end of the day. It's nothing more than language, you know. Um, you have a language, you have a word, croaky. You said, I'm sorry, I'm croaky today, right?
I'm quite croaking the
I
throat.
love that. I love that. I love that. That's not what Americans would say. I love the word, but
What would you say?
oh, the American, I don't know. I'm sorry, I'm a little stuffed up. Sorry, I'm a little congested. I love it. I love it. I'm croaky today. But the point is it means the same exact thing.
Yeah.
It's just language that you associate certain things with means something different to you. In the same way that all of our Bibles basically say, don't create an idol and worship it. That's what we do every single day and it's down to the word now. And, some people call God this, some people call God that, some people call God this, but it's the same. Everybody fighting over a word. It's the creator of all of us, the creator of the universe made me, made you, gave us all an opportunity to come down to earth, learn what it means to actually have abundant joy, by being able to compare it with the most miserable pain that we can experience. And once we understand what that suffering is, we can either live in the joy of knowing why we exist until we die, or we can die and then find out. And I don't mean by going to hell. I mean, I think literally every person before they die, they do their own math, man. They do their own inventory. How did this go? How am I leaving this thing? What's this bag look like on the floor now that I'm walking away? And a lot of people can't handle that. And that in itself will kill somebody. But if we can just realize that we all just want to be known for who we are and loved for it. Not, understanding that, the same thing that made me is the same thing that made you. Different, different situations, but it's the same pain. My heart, I promise you, I promise you, I promise you, my heart feels the same way when I lose my dad that somebody else that's experienced a very different life feels when they lose their dad. It manifests itself in a different way, but the pain that we experience to become known, it's all the same. It's all the same. And religion has just built their own Tower of Babel today and just cast everybody out and said, here, everybody's got your language. Go kill everybody until they know yours. It's like, it doesn't make sense, man. We're all part of the same thing here. And, that's one of my favorite things to do is to talk to people about that, is the oneness of it all,
When you went through, describe what because you said I've gone through religious trauma. What was
Yeah.
your religious trauma or your interpretation of your religious trauma?
Thank you, man. I really appreciate these questions. American Christians don't like to ask these questions. So,
Right.
uh, I was born into the church.
Mhm.
My lineage is pastors and farmers on one side, and then scientists and military guys on the other. So I have a very eclectic uh, raising in my journey with the church. When I was born into the church, it was the evangelical system, which is, you've got Baptist, Catholic, Protestant, Lutheran, Methodist, all these. And then you've got kind of the evangelical branch, which is more of a non-denominational. It kind of covers all of them. It's anybody and everybody come on in, we'll do church together. So as a child, I was born into the evangelical church system. Um, my father was a teacher in the church. He was a construction worker by trade. Actually, a woodworker would be a better way to put it. The guy could build anything better than anybody I knew. But he was also a teacher in the church. So I was, and mom, she was always involved in church in the choir or singing or youth group. We were there all the time, is what I'm saying. So, there's a lot of trauma that comes with that. I've had friends that were raped by their youth pastor. Both of which were very good friends of mine. I've watched other churches make concessions for men that clearly hurt many, 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 many people while on staff at those churches. I have been accused of being a cult leader by members of other churches that had never even attended our church before because of their own interpretations of how I worship, I suppose, maybe. I don't know. I don't know what that was about, but that was a 6 month period where, my family had death threats. We had police surveillance for about a month, so my trauma comes from some really very real places, there's much more I could talk about if we had more time. But at the end of that, I wrote a song called Someone Poisoned My Wine. And, I can remember when I started writing that song, I thought that's what it was about. I thought it was going to be about how I had been taken advantage of by the church. Uh, but if you do the work and if you're not afraid to go deep enough in your own darkness to find the answers, as I did the math, it ended up being I'm the one that poisoned my wine. I have free will. I can leave anytime. I can make whatever decision I want. And so, the times that I did leave, um, the churches that I was involved in, at the end of the day, it was usually kind of me standing on this island by myself, looking back over at this little patch of land that these men are on, staring back at me. And it's like I'm still standing on the same thing that they hired me on. I'm still on that island. You told me what to expect by joining you in service to God and what my role would be, and I'm fulfilling that role exactly. But bit by bit, men will pass over their own power to other men and other decisions that are not in line with their original focus and purpose. It's the same thing that happens with these major organizations of disaster relief. It's like they start in a little town that gets devastated, and the hearts were all there, and everybody was giving money, and everybody was helping. You know, cut forward 50 years, and then now it's a corporation that just milks other people for money and don't actually operate within the realm of humanity like it once did. The perspective of what mattered changed. And it happens to us all. It happens to us all. I happen to take a daily inventory. I check with myself and God every day, say, hey, where are we at? What's my life look like? What are the decisions I need to make? But it's not difficult. It's actually a very, very peaceful life to have. I meet with my son once a week and we go over spiritual teachings. Right now, we're talking about Jesus. We're always talking about Jesus, but I'm correlating Jesus's teachings with the same mindset that's found in the Tao Te Ching by Lao Tzu. And it's just a common consciousness, man. And I believe that's what I think, that when Jesus comes back, I don't have to expect him to come back on a white horse. That's not, if he doesn't come back in the sky on a white horse to take me up, that's okay with me. I'm all right. I believe that I've already experienced the coming of Christ in my own life. I died. So it's a very real thing. This is a sacred space for me, and I appreciate you asking it. So the religious trauma that I've dealt with has been this um, this pattern of failure, whether it was my own or another man's that I was a part of. And at the end of the day, I poisoned my own wine. I should have left earlier. Maybe I shouldn't, because I was the guy that sometimes would be asked to ask people to leave the church. I was a creative arts director in a lot of cases, where it's kind of I'm behind the scenes helping run the whole gamut. A couple of the churches I was at, it was just I was responsible for everything except for the sermon. You know, um, So my hands were in all of the pies. I was involved in all of the ministries across the board. So there was a lot of opportunity for religious trauma when you're dealing with broken people um, that are operating under their own power. There you go. That's the best way to put it.
Okay. Thank you for sharing. And we're only just scratching the surface, to be fair, Jeremy, because I know there's a lot more. Because I know you left. What was the reason you left the being a pastor?
Well, I'm not going to use names. That's the only way. Yeah, it was a situation. I was at a very big, very, very big church. We had 3 different campuses that I was responsible for, and
It's okay if you don't want to. It's okay.
no, I want to tell this story because it's important.
Mm.
Um, there was a man that was part of another church that was a pretty big it was a big church. It was one of the fastest growing churches in the country, and he had uh, a moral failure, and he was asked to leave that church, so he left that, came to our church, and he came to our church for I don't know how long. Point is I recognize patterns very well,
Mm.
and the patterns that he was putting out, and the people that were telling me things because I was a leader at the church, uh, did not align with
Yeah.
the kingdom of God,
So,
And so it was a situation where um, I tried to tell the pastor what was going on. And I was on that island again, looking back at other men looking at me, wondering why I was doing what I was doing when all I was doing was I was being a shepherd. That's what I was hired to do. And yeah, that's it. People don't like to have their flocks messed with. And
so your autistic brain, the logical, because you think really logical, do you kind of, and tell me if I'm wrong, does it kind of sounds like that's, you've got this perfect bullshit detector.
it's a good way to put it.
You genuinely bullshit just pops up and you, no, what they're saying is not matching the pattern. Right? No, they can say this, but that's not. So
Doesn't mean I act on it all the time. I try
no, I
not to
know.
anymore.
I know. No, I know. Because then
Yeah,
I know that we've got faith, and faith is powerful for a lot of
that's
people.
right. That's right.
And I'm not a religious person, and that's why I like having the conversations. I think the conversations are powerful. I'm very much consciousness driven, and from my understanding of consciousness is that we are all part of consciousness, and we are
Yeah,
all. You are 100% right. Everybody is connected to the higher power, whatever that higher power is, whichever
yeah,
label you put to that higher power. We are all a part of that.
yeah.
And I am reading a book on Genesis Revisited. I keep mentioning this book because I know there's more science. Maybe it might not be called science fiction shortly. Maybe it might be called science
Yeah.
fact.
Right, right. There's a lot of that nowadays, man. Oh, I'm loving
There's
it.
an awful
Look,
lot of it. Yes.
I've been a student of scripture for a very long time, and it never gets old. It never gets old. I'm currently reading through the Bible probably for at least the 10th time in my life. I try to read it once a year now, have done so for the last couple years, and it never gets old, man. Never gets old. And it's a Bible or it's a book, I believe, that just like many of these scriptural teachings, man, these are stories of humanity that get you to ask the questions yourself on what's appropriate. How, what did they do right or not? And if you were in that, well, what you going to do? Because one of these days you're going to be in a similar situation. And look, here's a book of teachings of historical, evidence uh, that tells the story of how it worked out for that person, and then apply the teachings. It's a very wise book. And I get my wisdom from many books. But I would encourage you to continue to read scripture, some kind of scripture.
Well, I think a lot of my readings are before scripture. I think I'm
I
trying.
understand. I understand what you're saying, but what I would say is I am too.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm talking about the oldest teachings. The Christian Bible that we use um, absolutely has its own story, but I believe many of those stories come from the foundations that have existed for thousands and thousands more years than what
Yes. Yeah.
those teachings themselves. I'm not saying the experiences that the Jewish people recorded in this book didn't happen at those times. I actually kind of believe that they did. I think that these are all based in some kind of story. They're told through metaphor sometimes, but I do believe that that's the history of the Jewish people, um, and modern day Christians even. But I believe that the fullness of God expands far beyond just this book.
Yeah. So let's go through briefly through, well, not briefly, but talk about the addiction to the painkillers because there was a
Yeah.
problem with the back, I believe.
Yeah, yeah. So I was born into a family of back problems. My dad and every one of his siblings had to have the same back surgery on the same location on their spine. Well, I inherited the same. So as a young man, I did not take it easy on my body. I absolutely wrecked my body every opportunity I could. I was an adrenaline junkie. So, cut forward to me being 40 years old and meeting with my doctor, and he was fully aware of my back at that time, and I want to make sure it was 40. It might have been 39, 38. Anyway, around 40. And so he was like, it's not a matter of if, Jeremy, it's a matter of when. And I was like, well, if it's a matter of when, then I want the surgery now. So obviously it took time. I had to get approved insurance and all this stuff. So at that time, I was, I'm sorry, I got to back up because the addiction stuff happened before my back surgery. And I'll explain
Ah,
that.
right. So the addiction, the
Yeah.
thing. Right.
The addiction actually, I think, spurned it on because um, I was at a church. I was vehemently against medication. My grandfather was a pharmacist, and pills were not friends to my family. So I was vehemently against them. So, but I had an elder at my church at the time that was like, hey, I can notice you're in pain on stage. You know, maybe you should, because he was my doctor. He treated me. So he said, maybe you should at least try this. So I did. I went ahead and started taking hydrocodone. And so man, over the course of time, I just, I didn't pay attention. I was just, if my back hurt, I just run over, move on with my day. And at the same time, there was some very, very, unfortunate things happening in my personal life. And the combination of that was uh, just made it really, really easy to take as many pills as I felt like I wanted to take just to kind of get out of that headspace. Um, and I did that for a while. And then, that kind of mentality led me to a new doctor because my insurance changed. Insurance in America is terrible. But anyway, my insurance changed. And so it meant I had to get a new doctor. So instead of seeing the same doctor that I had seen, for since I was 16, I had to go to a new doctor that was I, he just everything was treated with a pill. So by the time I left him, I was on 500 different pills a month, 150 of which were, the highest dosage pain medicine you could have. And my pattern by then, because at that time, my wife cheated on me, which we had been married for 20 years. She cheated on me. I had lost my job at the church. I was spiraling out of control because I couldn't play music. I didn't know anything that was real anymore because my high school sweetheart had just betrayed me in a way I had never, thought, And then on top of that, as an autistic man that thinks logically, why is this happening to me? It crushed me. And so what I would do is I would get 150 pain pills and I'd take them in 2 weeks. They'd be gone. They'd be gone. And then for 2 weeks, I'd white knuckle it and I would bear down and just get through it. I had a few friends, maybe one or two friends that I had gone to church with that knew that I was in pain, that they would help me every once in a while. But I wasn't the guy that was going and buying drugs on the streets or pills or anything. I was trying to treat it as best as I could, but I was spiraling. I was out of control. So finally, I got my insurance to go back to my childhood doctor, and as soon as I walked in, I said, like, Dr. Gilbert, I'm a mess. I need your help. I said, I think I messed up. And so he was like, well, what's going on, buddy? So we sat down and talked, and um, yeah, he helped me through that journey. And that's when it was like, well, Jeremy, you have to have back surgery. Like it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And so I was like, okay, well, then I want to go ahead and schedule it now. And so went ahead and had the back surgery. Before I even had back surgery, I was off of the pills like I was. I had 30 a month and I would take one a day. And then when I had my back surgery, I gave myself 6 weeks, 6 weeks and then no more. And so after that, I was pretty well done with it. I did keep a script around for a little bit, but it finally got to the point to where it was just like, oh, I probably don't even need to refill this anymore. So I just stopped refilling it. And so I've not, since my own moment, November 8th with the Lord that I had, I've not struggled with any of that. like nothing. I've not had one time where I've been like, oh man, I wish I could go get a pill. Or man, I used to be so bad. If I heard a pill bottle rattle, I'd be like, I'd turn my head, you know. That's where I used to be. So they call that the Kentucky mating call in some parts, you know. So, but yeah, I just my own battle with addiction taught me a lot. Taught me a lot about the parts of myself that I was willing to give up for um, false comfort. You know, it taught me what happens quite literally when I decide to take upon the teachings of um, not Jesus to heal me. Um, I fully believe in medicine. I'm not against medicine. I'm against pharmaceuticals and the companies that run it and the greed and the system. You know, I don't have a problem with somebody taking medication. Me personally, I choose not to. You know, I'm a plant medicine guy. So, but I just don't believe in pharmaceuticals the way that my grandfather did.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Jeremy, there's so much to talk about, Jeremy. There really is. And thank you very much for sharing. For you, as a man, if there was top three tips from your perspective and your understanding of how your life's gone,
Mhm.
how would you help or explain to somebody how they could manage their minds
Yeah.
quicker?
First and foremost, there absolutely is a master key to have a fulfilling um, and beautiful life. And it's called gratitude. And it's a very easy thing to do, but a very difficult thing to master. Um, but it is absolutely achievable. If you can constantly, and it takes work, literally, it takes work. I'll go on to step number two and then I'll tie it together. Step number two is wake up every single day and commit yourself to yourself. Commit yourself to yourself and to humanity every day. And number three, actively look for those ways to apply both. Look for ways that you can serve yourself and serve humanity. For me, man, it could look like just a wink and a smile at a dude at the cash register that's having a rough moment. It could be holding the door open just 2 seconds longer than you might have had to if you just walked right on in. You know, it could mean waving at somebody as they're passing you on the road. It could mean anything. But if you absolutely look for those moments of opportunity and gratitude, the Lord honors those. And you don't have to believe in him right now. He believes in you. And one of these days, that higher power, that higher consciousness that absolutely does operate in this reality, that kind of keeps everything, it's the glue that holds it all together. It's God. That is God's creation, and we're a part of it. And once we realize that, you know, at the end of the day, God's bigger than I am, man. And you know, I love you, but I can't fix you. You know, I'll be here to root you on every step of the way. I promise, man. I'll share your goals and dreams with you. I'll believe in you. But at the end of the day, man, it's you has to come to terms with who's running that show. Is it you or is it your higher power or all of our higher power? And that's where I believe in the law of oneness. We're all operating and we're moving in the same direction. And that's actually, I believe, what Jesus was actually teaching is the way. And so I would say be grateful. Open your day with, I open every single day before my feet hit the floor. I consciously say, thank you, God. Here we go. I get to do it again. Here we go.
Yeah,
And then I'll get out of bed and for the first, you know, couple hours of my day, it is spent setting my intentions for not only that day, but for whatever I'm getting ready to walk into. You know, there's a lot of times we don't prepare ourselves for these moments that can impact our lives so greatly. You know, I tell my son, buddy, I don't care where you are. If you are feeling overwhelmed, balance yourself. It doesn't it you and you can do this in 5 minutes. If you'll stop, get in your car, turn on some sweet vibe music, shut your eyes and shut up. That's it, man. Give yourself 5 minutes to prepare yourself for this. You won't have triggers. You won't have situations where you overreact. You won't have situations where your ego takes over because somebody just accidentally hurt your feelings by saying something they didn't mean. It's perspective. It's
That is,
language.
thank you.
Yeah.
Jeremy, you are clearly class at managing your mind. Thank you very much. And if
Thank you.
anything, I might say that Jesus healed your religious trauma.
Thank you for saying that. He did.
Absolutely. That will be the title of the podcast
Amen. I love it.
with
Thank
Jeremy
you.
Zeller. Now, Jeremy, thank you so much. I know you're coming to the UK this year to play some of that music. So you don't know where you're going to be going, but you can message me and I'll put it into the podcast description of where you're going to be playing in the UK.
Yeah.
Jeremy,
I'll, and if
thank
you want, I'll come on and do another episode before,
absolutely.
towards
Jeremy,
October.
it's
I'd
been a
love
pleasure.
to.
It's been an
Yeah.
absolute pleasure. The man, the myth, the legend that is Jeremy Zeller. As always, big love from Cuddy. And Jeremy, anything else you want to say?
Just try to support me online. I'm trying to get my stuff out. At the end of the day, I'm doing this again because I stepped off the road for 10 years to finish raising my kids, and now I'm back to do it again. I just recently released a song called "Hear Me." I'd love to get people sharing and supporting that. I released a love song called "The Night the Light Brought the Moon." That's a true story about the way I met my lady and the love of my life. And so, yeah, if you don't mind, hop on the social medias and like and share and talk about the music because that's ultimately what's kind of driving the bus right now. So,
Thank you very much, Jeremy. Absolute pleasure. As always, big love from Cuddy. If it's in the mind, it can be managed. And I will see you on the next episode of the Mind Management Mentors podcast.